Nothing about this seemed urgent. That's why no one stopped it. This is where certainty breaks. This episode examines a real case using documented records. It does not speculate beyond what was recorded. This case begins the way all systems prefer. Not with a crisis, not with a bang, but with the quiet, rustling assurance of paperwork. Because paperwork is order. It's a tangible record of action, a bulwark against chaos and liability. It creates a narrative that can be filed, tracked, and, if necessary, defended. Before a person is ever truly seen, they are converted into data points, their circumstances flattened into a series of checkboxes and form fields. This is the architecture of institutional memory, built one page at a time. Forms completed, visits scheduled, notes entered. The initial report, Form 302A, initial contact and risk stratification, is filled out in neat block letters. It asks for names, dates, and a preliminary assessment of the environment. It's a checklist of observable facts designed to be completed quickly and efficiently. Is there food in the refrigerator? Are the utilities connected? Is the home free of visible hazards? The questions are binary, leaving little room for nuance. The system isn't asking, "Is this family okay?" It's asking, "Does this situation meet the minimum threshold for immediate statutory intervention?" Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. The initial caseworker's notes reflect a scene of quiet, unremarkable domesticity. There are no signs of overt conflict, no immediate physical dangers that would trigger a high-priority alert. The system is calibrated for emergencies, for the visible, the audible, the undeniable crisis. It is less equipped to detect the slow, creeping erosion of well-being that happens in the quiet spaces, behind closed doors. The absence of alarm bells is, itself, recorded as a positive indicator. Everything looks handled. To a supervisor reviewing the file, the checklist is complete. The narrative is coherent. The caseworker made contact, assessed the environment against the established criteria, and filed the report within the mandated time frame. In the world of overburdened caseloads and limited resources, a file like this is a success. It represents a closed loop of procedure. It doesn't signify that a problem has been solved, but that a process has been correctly followed. The file can now be moved from urgent to monitoring. Reports were made. The initial intake was followed by a family functioning assessment, a more detailed document intended to paint a fuller picture. It delves into support systems, sources of income, and the parent's own history. Concerns were noted. Observations recorded. But they are recorded in the specific coded language of the bureaucracy. A parent described as lethargic or distracted. A child noted as overly quiet or eager to please. These are subjective observations filtered through the lens of a busy professional and transcribed into objective-sounding case notes. They are flags, but they are small ones, easily lost in the sea of procedural documentation. They hint at a problem without demanding an immediate solution. The language was careful. It is a dialect of risk management, honed over years of legal challenges and internal audits. Every word is chosen to be defensible. Vague terms are preferred over specific diagnoses. Appears and seems are used to create distance. The goal is not to capture the truth of a situation in all its messy complexity, but to create a record that is accurate within the narrow confines of what was directly observed and what policy requires to be documented. No immediate danger. Situation monitored. Follow-up recommended. These are the foundational phrases of systemic inertia. Family is cooperative is noted, a key phrase that lowers the perceived risk level. Client presents as stable. No indicators of substance abuse observed at this time. Each statement is technically true, based on a brief, scheduled interaction, but together, they form a powerful narrative of reassurance. They are procedural off-ramps, allowing the case to be de-escalated and placed on a standard, non-urgent track. Each phrase sounds responsible. Each phrase passes the problem forward. It's a form of institutional buck passing, but one without malice. It's the natural outcome of a system where success is measured by throughput and procedural compliance. The file is passed from intake to case management. The responsibility is diffused. The initial observer has done their job, and now it is someone else's turn. The urgency, if there ever was any, dissipates with each transfer. Home visits occurred. They were scheduled in advance, at times convenient for the family. These were not surprise inspections. They were appointments. The second visit, logged 6 weeks after the initial report, was conducted by a new caseworker who had only the previous notes to go on. They were there to confirm that the situation had not deteriorated, to check the same boxes that had been checked before. Questions were asked. Answers were given. The questions are from a script. How are things going? Are you getting the support you need? How is the child doing in school? The answers are plausible, rehearsed. Everything is fine. We're managing. He's a good boy, just quiet. It's a performance, a delicate dance of social propriety, where all participants understand their roles. The caseworker needs to gather information for their report, and the family needs to present an image of stability to be left alone. There were no raised voices, no visible emergency. The house was clean. The child was dressed appropriately. The surface appeared calm. The caseworker, trained to spot the glaring red flags of abuse and neglect, found none. They did not see the tension in the mother's shoulders or the way the child's eyes constantly darted towards her, seeking approval. They saw a tidy home and heard quiet voices, and in the calculus of risk assessment, this data pointed away from crisis. Compliance was present. The family kept the appointments. They answered the door. They responded to the questions. They signed the necessary forms. This cooperation is a powerful mitigator in the eyes of the system. It suggests a willingness to engage, a respect for the process. It is interpreted as evidence that the family is functional enough to manage its own affairs, even if there are underlying issues. And compliance is reassuring. It's the lubricant that keeps the gears of the bureaucracy turning smoothly. A non-compliant family creates friction. It generates more paperwork, requires more resources, and escalates the level of intervention. A compliant family, however, allows the case to proceed along a predictable, low-intensity path. It allows the caseworker to check the box that says, "Family is cooperative," and move on to the next file in their towering stack. It tells the system it can slow down. It gives permission for the intervals between visits to be extended, for the level of scrutiny to be reduced. The paper trail is now complete. It tells a story of a situation that was reported, assessed, and found to be stable. It is a story of diligence and due process. And stored deep within the quiet, climate-controlled archives of the system, this story will lie dormant, a perfect record of everything that was seen, and a silent testament to everything that was missed. In any complex system designed to handle human crisis, the first step is almost always the same: translation. A raw, chaotic story of distress is converted into data. It's entered into a form, assigned a case number, and filed. This act of translation is an act of containment. It imposes order on disorder. But it's also an act of division. The moment a story becomes a file, it is prepared for dissection. Responsibility, once singular and heavy, begins to fracture. It doesn't just move from one person to another. It splinters, spreading outward through the arteries of the bureaucracy. The initial report, a cohesive narrative of concern, is immediately broken down into its constituent parts: keywords, incident types, risk factors, each destined for a different path, a different set of eyes. The whole story ceases to exist in any single place. The journey begins, from the intake worker to the field agent, from the agent to their direct supervisor. Each handoff is a transaction, a formal transfer of a fragment of the problem, a signature on a form, a click on a forward button, a brief, jargon-filled conversation in a hallway. I've actioned my part. It's with you now. With each transfer, the context thins. The emotional weight dissipates. The file that lands on the supervisor's desk is already an abstraction, a summary of a summary. Then, the file travels further. from one specialized department to another, from the local Child Protective Services office to the regional law enforcement liaison, from a social services agency to a mental health assessment unit. Each agency has its own mandate, its own language, its own software. They don't share a common database. They share a common problem, but they only ever see their slice of it. No single person held the whole picture. This wasn't a conspiracy of silence. It was a structural reality. The system was a mosaic, and each employee was given only their single assigned tile. They could polish it, analyze it, and pass it to the person building the adjacent section, but they were never allowed to step back and see the full image they were creating. The housing specialist saw an unstable living situation, but couldn't access the school's reports of chronic absenteeism. The school counselor saw the absenteeism, but was firewalled from the police department's domestic disturbance calls. The police officer who responded to the calls saw a single volatile evening but had no visibility into the long-term pattern of neglect documented by social services. Each saw a worrying symptom, but no one was positioned to diagnose the underlying disease. The system was designed for specialization, for efficiency. But in fragmenting the problem, it had also fragmented the truth. Each person held a piece just small enough to manage, not just in terms of workload, but in terms of psychological burden. A report of inadequate supervision is concerning, but manageable. A police log of a verbal dispute is routine. A teacher's note about a child being withdrawn is a flag, but a common one. These fragments, isolated, lack the terrifying gravity of the whole. They are small enough to be processed, categorized, and then released. Releasing the piece feels like doing your job. It's a transfer of responsibility that feels like progress. The act of forwarding the email, of signing the handoff sheet, creates a feeling of closure. My part is done. This psychological release is a crucial, if unintentional, feature of the system. It protects the individual from the overwhelming weight of the complete picture, but in doing so, it ensures that no one ever has to bear it. In the absence of a complete picture, procedure becomes paramount. Decisions were not measured against the holistic reality of a child's life. They were measured against guidelines. Thick binders of policy, labyrinthine digital manuals, and multi-page checklists became the arbiters of action. The question was no longer, is this child safe? But, does this situation meet the statutory definition of harm as outlined in Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 3? Intuition, experience, and a felt sense of urgency were secondary to the cold, hard text of the rules. The guidelines were a shield. For the worker, they provided a clear, defensible path. If you follow the procedure, you cannot be faulted. For the organization, they ensured consistency and mitigated legal liability. But this rigid adherence to protocol had a chilling effect. It replaced critical judgment with bureaucratic compliance. The goal shifted from protecting the vulnerable to protecting the process. Within this world of procedure, thresholds mattered more than anything. These were the invisible tripwires embedded in the system. A specific number of reports within a certain time frame. A score on a standardized risk assessment tool. A documented injury of a particular severity. These were the binary gates. If a case meets the threshold, a new path opens. If it does not, the path is a dead end. A caseworker might review a file filled with deeply concerning yet low-level incidents. Individually, none of them were severe enough to trigger the official threshold for escalation. The cumulative weight of the concerns, the pattern they formed, was not a variable the system was programmed to compute. The cursor on the screen hovered just below the red line. The risk score was a 4.9 when it needed to be a 5.0, and so, nothing crossed them. The report was filed, the box was checked, criteria not met. The case was designated for monitoring, a passive state of observation that often meant it simply sat in a queue, waiting for the next report. A report that might, finally, be the one to trip the wire. Each decision point was a pass-fail test, and the case kept failing. Not because the situation wasn't dangerous, but because it wasn't dangerous in the precise way the rulebook demanded. The system was built to react to explosions, not to the slow, corrosive burn of chronic neglect, and if nothing crosses a threshold, nothing escalates. This is the fundamental logic of the system. Escalation means more resources, more scrutiny, more difficult decisions. It means activating a crisis response. The system, by its very nature, is designed to resist this state. It seeks equilibrium. It seeks calm. When a case fails to meet the criteria for escalation, it is effectively neutralized. The alarm bell that should have rung remains silent. The red flag that should have been raised is never unfurled. To an outside observer or to a manager reviewing a dashboard, everything appears to be functioning as intended. The workflow is smooth. The queues are managed. There are no alerts flashing. The system remains calm because it's designed to. It is a machine engineered to absorb and dampen shocks, not to amplify them. Its primary function in practice is its own preservation. A calm system is a working system. An escalated system is a system in crisis, one that draws unwanted attention and requires justification. Every procedure, every handoff, every threshold is a buffer, a layer of insulation designed to maintain operational stability. The quiet hum of the servers, the soft glow of the monitors, the orderly rows of cubicles, it's all evidence of a system at peace with itself, entirely unaware of the storm it is failing to see. Over time, another, more insidious process begins. Repeated concerns become familiar. The first report about the family is alarming. The second is worrying. By the fifth, it has become a known quantity. The case file becomes thick. The name becomes recognizable. Oh, the Miller case again. This isn't a sign of escalating crisis. It's a sign of a chronic, unchanging problem. It becomes part of the office landscape, a recurring item on a long list of recurring items. And familiarity breeds normalization. The shock wears off. The recurring crisis becomes the new normal. The state of danger is no longer seen as an acute emergency, but as a baseline condition for that particular case. It's just the way things are for that family. This normalization is a cognitive shortcut, a way for overworked staff to manage an unmanageable caseload. They begin to recalibrate their own internal sense of alarm. The constant exposure to dysfunction desensitizes them, and the case that once stood out now blends into the background noise of 100 other difficult cases. Normalization breeds tolerance. Once a state of affairs is accepted as normal, it becomes tolerable. The urgency to intervene is replaced by a strategy of management. The goal is no longer to solve the problem, but to contain it. To file the reports, to make the requisite home visits, to check the boxes, and to keep the case moving through the procedural pipeline without it ever escalating. The system, and the people within it, learn to live with a level of risk that would have been unthinkable when the first report was filed. The danger hasn't lessened. The perception of the danger has. This tolerance sounds like patience. It's expressed in phrases like, "We're monitoring the situation," or "We need to give the family time to engage with services," or "Let's wait and see what the next report says." It sounds professional, measured, and reasonable. It sounds like due process. It's the language of a system that prioritizes stability and process over decisive action. It's the sound of waiting for a threshold to be crossed, for a rule to be definitively broken, for the situation to become so undeniably bad that the system is finally forced to act. But patience can be lethal when harm is quiet. It is a luxury that assumes time is a neutral force, that waiting is a safe and viable option. But in cases of chronic neglect or emotional abuse, harm is not an event. It is an atmosphere. It doesn't happen in a single explosive moment that can be easily documented and categorized. It accumulates. It's the slow, steady erosion of a child's well-being, happening behind closed doors, in the quiet moments between official visits. While the system waits patiently for a clear signal, the damage is being done, day by day, in silence. In the aftermath, when investigators trace the path of failure, this is the moment people point to. They find one report, one observation, one sentence buried deep in the file. It's the teacher who noted the child hoarding food from the cafeteria. The neighbor who reported the child was often left alone for hours. The doctor who documented failure to thrive but couldn't prove neglect. It is the one piece of the puzzle that, in hindsight, looks like the key, the one that should have changed everything. It didn't. It didn't, because it didn't stand alone. It was never seen in isolation. On the day it was received, it wasn't a glowing premonition of tragedy. It was just one more document, one more data point, one more piece of paper in a file already thick with them. It blended in. It was absorbed by the very system that was supposed to act on it. And blended signals don't alarm systems. They are filtered out as noise. The system, functioning exactly as it was designed, stayed calm. And in its calm, it was complicit. When the outcome finally arrives, the search begins. Not for answers, but for a single, identifiable point of failure. In the sterile quiet of review boards and the harsh glare of public scrutiny, there is a desperate need for a simple story. A villain, a mistake, a moment where everything went wrong. Investigators, auditors, and internal affairs officers are deployed with a clear mandate. Find the fracture. Find the person or the procedure that broke. They comb through every email, every log entry, every form submitted and filed. They are looking for the smoking gun, the clear evidence of a dereliction of duty. They expect to find a broken rule, a mandatory deadline missed by a day, a required signature that was never obtained. They anticipate uncovering a missed visit, a phone call that was never returned, a critical piece of information noted in the margins of a form but never escalated. They search for a negligent act, a moment of inattention, a shortcut taken, a willful disregard for established protocol. These are the familiar, understandable narratives of failure. They are the errors that systems are built to catch and that people are trained to avoid. A single, clear violation would be, in its own way, a comfort. It would provide a locus for blame, a lesson to be learned, a simple fix to be implemented. It would mean the system itself was sound, but that a component within it had malfunctioned. But as days of review turn into weeks, a strange and unsettling quiet settles over the investigation. The expected red flags do not appear. The clear-cut errors remain elusive. They don't find one, not a single one. Every form was filed on time. Every required contact was logged. Every procedural box was ticked. The paper trail is immaculate, a perfect record of professional diligence. The digital footprint shows a steady, consistent rhythm of work. There is no gap in the timeline, no moment of obvious neglect. There is only the steady, documented hum of a bureaucracy functioning exactly as it was designed to. Because nothing broke. No single regulation was violated. No individual stepped outside the clearly defined boundaries of their role. To an outside observer, and even to the investigators themselves, the case file reads like a textbook example of proper procedure. Each action taken was justifiable, defensible, and documented. Each decision was made in accordance with the guidelines. The absence of error is total, and it is terrifying. It forces a shift in perspective, away from the search for a broken part and toward an examination of the machine itself. Here is the realization that unsettles. It's a conclusion so profound and disturbing that it resists easy acceptance. It's the quiet, creeping horror that dawns in the minds of those who have spent weeks searching for a simple mistake, only to find a perfect, unbroken chain of compliant actions leading directly to tragedy. The problem wasn't a person. The problem was the process. No single person failed. The intake officer who first logged the case correctly categorized it based on the information provided, using the mandated rubric. The caseworker assigned to the file completed their initial assessment within the 48-hour required window, noting the key facts as they were presented. The supervisor who reviewed the caseworker's report saw that all fields were complete and all immediate protocols were followed, so they signed off, moving it to the next stage. Each person was a single, efficient node in a vast network. They performed their specific function with competence and care. They saw their small part of the puzzle, and they solved it perfectly. The system failed collectively by distributing responsibility until no one felt authorized to stop everything. This is the phenomenon known as the diffusion of responsibility. Each employee, by design, was given a narrow scope of authority. The caseworker could recommend, but not command. The supervisor could approve a report, but not unilaterally allocate emergency resources from another department. The specialist could offer an opinion, but not override the primary case manager. At each handoff, ownership was transferred. The person passing the file on felt they had done their part. The person receiving it assumed everything up to that point was settled. No one person ever held the full picture. No one person was ever in a position where the rules empowered them to hit the emergency brake and halt the entire process. They were trained to trust the next person in the chain, to believe in the integrity of the system as a whole. Systems are designed to prevent panic. They are built on the principles of order, predictability, and control. In large organizations dealing with high stakes, high volume work, protocols and checklists are essential. They prevent emotional, impulsive decisions. They ensure a baseline standard of care and create a predictable workflow that can be managed and audited. The goal is to create a process that is resilient to the flaws of individual human judgment, a process that runs smoothly regardless of who is operating it. Panic is the enemy of order. Therefore, the system is engineered to dampen it, to rationalize it, to channel it into predefined, manageable pathways. They do this by smoothing extremes. A single alarming report, a spike on the graph, is averaged with all the non-alarming data points that came before it. A gut feeling of urgent concern expressed by a frontline worker is translated into the neutral, bureaucratic language of a standardized form. The system is designed to be skeptical of outliers. It demands overwhelming evidence to trigger an extreme response. A single data point, no matter how worrying, is treated as just that, a single data point. It must be corroborated, cross-referenced, and validated through multiple channels before the system's inertia can be overcome. This smoothing mechanism is a feature, not a bug. It prevents the entire apparatus from grinding to a halt every time a single, anomalous piece of information is introduced. But when harm arrives, not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, creeping tide, smoothing becomes erasure. Each individual warning sign, when viewed in isolation through the narrow lens of a specific department or a single procedural step, is successfully smoothed. It is contextualized, rationalized, and downgraded. The caseworker notes a concern, but the form they use has no field for vague, unsettling feeling. The supervisor sees the note, but their protocol requires 2 such notes from separate visits to trigger an escalation. The second visit is scheduled weeks out, per standard procedure. Each signal is dampened until the overall picture, as assembled by the system, shows nothing out of the ordinary. The gradual accumulation of risk, the pattern that is terrifyingly obvious in hindsight, is rendered invisible in real time. And erasure looks like normal work being done. It looks like emails being answered promptly. It looks like files being moved from an inbox to an outbox. It looks like meetings that start and end on time. It looks like professionals calmly and competently executing the tasks assigned to them. There is no shouting, no alarm bells, no visible crisis. The tragedy unfolds in the quiet hum of office equipment, under the placid glow of fluorescent lights. The very appearance of normalcy becomes the most insidious part of the failure, reassuring everyone involved that their small, compliant actions are correct, even as they collectively pave the way for disaster. Everyone did their job. This is the final, chilling conclusion of the internal review. It is the sentence that hangs in the air, thick with unspoken horror. It is an indictment not of people, but of the structures we build to manage our most complex and vital responsibilities. That's why no one saved her. Because the system designed to protect her was not built to recognize the kind of danger she was in. It was a system that valued procedure over perception, compliance over comprehension. And in the end, her safety fell into the gaps between the perfectly executed steps of a flawless protocol. This is Armchair Files. And this was File 018. If this episode changed how you think about accountability, share it with someone who believes good intentions are enough.